There's something about those late night Reddit deep dives that always leave you with this uneasy feeling, like you've just unlocked some kind of hidden part of the internet you weren't meant to see. And trust me, this story is one of those. This is a real Reddit post that was deleted shortly after it went up, but not before some people managed to copy and archive it. The original poster never updated again, and nobody knows what happened to them after. It starts off innocent enough, just a regular guy venting about some strange things happening in his apartment. But the deeper you go, the more you realize something horrifying is happening. Something beyond explanation. The post was titled, "I keep waking up to find things moved in my apartment, but I live alone." And it read, "For the past month, I've been noticing little things out of place when I wake up. At first, I thought I was just being forgetful, but it's getting worse. My keys will be on the counter when I know I left them on the table. My fridge door will be slightly open, and I distinctly remember closing it. My phone was in the bathroom once, and I never take my phone into the bathroom at night. It's nothing huge, nothing dramatic, but it's enough to make me feel uneasy. I live alone in a small one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor, and the only entrance is my front door. The windows don't open, and I always lock the door before bed. Always. So how the hell are things moving?" The comments were flooded with people suggesting the usual. Maybe he had sleepwalking disorder, maybe he was just forgetful, maybe it was stress. But OP swore up and down that he wasn't sleepwalking, and that he was completely in his right mind. Then things got worse. He updated the post. "Something is wrong. I woke up last night at exactly 3:12 a.m., feeling like I was being watched. My heart was racing, but I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, maybe? But then I heard something. The sound of someone breathing right next to me. Slow, steady breaths. I forced myself to move, reaching for my phone, and the second I turned the screen on, the breathing stopped. I turned on my bedside lamp. Nothing there. But my bedroom door, it was open. And I know I closed it before bed." OP set up his phone to record himself sleeping. He wanted proof. Some kind of answer. The next night, he let the camera run, placed on his nightstand facing the bed. He woke up, feeling watched again. The bedroom door was open. His closet door was slightly ajar. He checked the footage, and that's when he really started to panic. The video showed him sleeping peacefully for the first few hours, but around 3:10 a.m. something changed. The covers on his bed shifted, like someone was pulling them ever so slightly. Then, the closet door creaked open just an inch, slow and deliberate. But the worst part? A shadowy figure appeared at the edge of the frame, just barely visible in the darkness. It stood there for nearly 20 minutes, completely motionless, watching him sleep. Then, at 3:30, it slowly backed into the closet and the door shut on its own. OP didn't sleep the next night. He locked his bedroom door, barricaded it with a chair, and sat awake with the lights on. He didn't hear anything, didn't see anything, but when he got up to check the front door in the morning, the chain lock was unlatched. And that's when he really started to lose it. He called the landlord, demanding to know if anyone else had a key. The landlord insisted no one did. OP was about to call the police, but what would he even say? "Hi, I think a shadow is stalking me in my sleep." Instead, he bought a cheap security camera and set it up facing his bedroom door. That night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the motion detector picked up something. The door opened on its own, and then, for a split second, a hand appeared in the doorway. Not a normal hand. The fingers were too long, the skin too pale. It reached up, grasped the door frame, and then suddenly the feed cut out. OP woke up to find the camera smashed at the floor. He packed a bag and left. He drove to his parents' house 2 towns over, refusing to step foot in that apartment again. The landlord called a few days later, seeing they found his apartment completely trashed. Furniture overturned, deep scratches on the walls. The closet door had been ripped off its hinges. OP never went back. The post was deleted a few days later. No updates, no follow-up. Just gone. Some people think it was a hoax, but the ones who saved the footage before the post disappeared swear it was real. The way the shadow moved, the way the closet door opened on its own, and that hand, it wasn't human. Some people said the apartment could have been built on something, maybe a site of some horrible event. Others said it was a demon, an entity, something ancient and hungry. But the worst theory? Someone suggested that whatever it was, it had been there long before OP moved in. It had always been in the closet, watching, waiting, and it didn't like being seen, so it made sure OP would never return. But here's where things get even weirder. A few months later, another Redditor claimed to have moved into the same apartment. They posted something chilling. I think my closet is haunted. And that's when people really started to freak out. The same thing started happening. Doors moving, whispers in the night, the closet door never staying shut. They even mentioned waking up at exactly 3:12 a.m., feeling watched. The account was deleted shortly after. To this day, no one knows what's really going on in that apartment. The landlord refuses to talk about it. But if you ever find yourself moving into a new place and the closet door just won't stay shut, maybe, just maybe, you should leave it alone. Or better yet, don't move in at all. I never thought I would be the type of person to have a stalker. That kind of thing happens to celebrities, influencers, people in the public eye, not regular people like me. But I know now that it can happen to anyone, and once it starts, there's almost nothing you can do to stop it. It started small, a misplaced feeling at first. I would walk home from work at night and get the sense that someone was following me. But when I turned around, the sidewalk was always empty. Sometimes I would hear footsteps that stopped the second I did. Sometimes I would see a shadow in my peripheral vision, only to find nothing there when I looked. It was unsettling, but I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. Then things escalated. One night, I got home and found my front door unlocked. I never forget to lock my door. My stomach dropped as I stepped inside, bracing myself for something, anything. But the house was exactly how I left it. No drawers open, no furniture out of place. Nothing was stolen. The only thing that was different was the air. It felt off, like someone had been there just seconds before I walked in. I checked every room, every closet, but I was alone. I told myself I must have forgotten to lock it, but I didn't sleep that night, and I should have trusted my instincts. The notes started appearing soon after. The first one was on my car windshield. "You looked beautiful today." No name, no signature, just those words, written in neat, careful handwriting. It was unnerving, but I tried to brush it off as a creepy prank. But then the second note came. This time, it was inside my apartment. I found it on my bedside table when I got home from work. "I love watching you sleep. I felt sick. Someone had been in my home. Someone had been in my bedroom. I checked every lock, every window, but they were all intact. I had no idea how they got in, and that was the worst part.
I didn't know where the entry point was. I called the police, but they were frustratingly unhelpful. Could be a prank, one officer suggested. Maybe a friend messing with you. It was the same patronizing tone they always use when they don't believe you. They took a report, but told me there wasn't much they could do. I was on my own. That night, I barricaded my bedroom door and slept with a knife under my pillow. But no matter what I did, it got worse. The next note was taped to my bathroom mirror. I hate when you close the blinds. I started to unravel. Every little sound made my heart race. Every shadow felt like a person watching me. I stopped going out at night. I changed my locks. I set up cameras. But whoever they were smarter than me. None of the cameras ever caught anything. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was losing my mind. But then I found something that shattered any hope I had left. My phone. I had been scrolling through my photos, looking for an old screenshot, when I saw a picture I didn't remember taking. My stomach turned to ice. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed. The angle was all wrong. It wasn't a selfie. It had been taken from inside my closet. That was the moment I truly lost it. I packed a bag and left, checking into a motel miles away. I didn't go back, not even to get my stuff. I reported it to the police again, showed them the photo, begged them to do something, but nothing ever came of it. The only thing they found was that my bedroom closet door had a tiny drilled hole, just big enough for someone to peek through. There were scratches on the inside, as if someone had been hiding in there for a long time. I never went back to that apartment. I moved across the country, changed my number, wiped my social media, and never looked back. I don't know who they were or why they chose me. But the scariest part, I don't know if they ever stopped.
There are many disturbing theories about what really happened in this case, and while none of them provide definitive answers, they each offer horrifying possibilities. The first and most obvious theory is that the stalker was someone the victim knew, possibly an acquaintance, co-worker, or even a stranger who had been secretly watching for weeks, months, or even years. Many cases of stalking begin with an obsession that escalates. It could have started as someone noticing the victim in public, following them home just once out of curiosity, and then gradually becoming more fixated, memorizing their schedule, learning their habits, and finding ways to get closer. The fact that the stalker was able to enter the apartment so easily suggests they either had a key, knew how to pick the lock, or had been inside before the victim moved in. If that's the case, then it raises an even scarier question, that they've been living there the whole time. This brings us to the second, far more terrifying theory, the hidden occupant theory. Cases exist where people have unknowingly lived with someone hiding in their home for extended periods. These froggers, as some call them, find ways to slip in undetected, using crawl spaces, attics, or even secret compartments in walls. Some even carve out small holes to watch their victims unnoticed, just like the one found in the closet. What if the stalker wasn't just visiting the apartment while the victim was out, but was actually living in the walls, the attic, or even under the bed when they weren't home? This would explain why the notes kept appearing despite changing locks and installing cameras. It would explain how the stalker was able to take a photo from inside the closet, because they were already there. Some chilling, real-life cases suggest this is more common than people think. There have been reports of stalkers sneaking into houses during the day and living in attics for months without being caught, slipping out only when the homeowner leaves. The scratches inside the closet could be proof of long-term occupation. If this was the case, then the victim might have unknowingly walked past their stalker multiple times without even realizing it. Another disturbing theory is that the stalker wasn't acting alone. The phrase, "I hate when you close the blinds," suggests that they had been watching the victim from outside, possibly from a nearby building or an adjacent apartment. If they had multiple vantage points, it means they either had an accomplice or they had cameras set up without the victim knowing. The idea of hidden cameras is terrifying, but not impossible. Modern technology allows for pinhole cameras so small they can be disguised as screws, electrical outlets, or even tiny holes in the wall. If the stalker had access to the apartment before the victim moved in, they could have installed surveillance equipment to monitor every movement. This would explain how they always knew when the victim was alone, when they were sleeping, and even when they were out of the house. It also means they could have been watching long before the notes even started appearing. But what if the stalker wasn't after something as simple as watching? What if they were waiting for the right moment to strike? The theory that this could have been an escalating predator is one of the most unsettling. Many serial offenders begin their process with stalking, breaking in, leaving messages, and testing their victim's response. Some do it for the power trip, enjoying the psychological torture of knowing their victim is scared but has no proof of their existence. But eventually, in nearly every case like this, they reach a point where that isn't enough. The gradual increase from simple notes to physically entering the bedroom and taking pictures is the kind of escalation seen in many home invasion cases that end in violence. If the victim hadn't left when they did, there's a terrifying possibility that one night the stalker wouldn't have just taken a picture. They would have been standing over the bed, waiting. Another horrifying possibility is that the stalker was someone who had been in the victim's life the whole time but never revealed themselves. A distant friend, a rejected admirer, or even a complete stranger who fixated on them after a single brief encounter. Some stalkers become obsessed with the idea that they have a special connection with their target, even if they've only spoken once in passing. These individuals sometimes believe their victim is sending them secret messages, unknowingly communicating with them through everyday actions. If this was the case, the stalker may have truly believed they were in a relationship with the victim, one that the victim wasn't even aware of. I've never told this story to anyone because, honestly, I don't know if I even believe it myself, but I need to get it out, because if I don't, I feel like it's going to eat me alive. This happened to me about 5 years ago when I was renting a small house on the outskirts of a quiet town. It was nothing special, just a simple one-story house with 2 bedrooms, a small backyard, and a basement that I never used. But there was something off about that house. I could never quite put my finger on it, but from the day I moved in, I felt like something was wrong. Like the house wasn't supposed to be there. The air always felt thick, heavy. And at night, there was this strange creaking sound, like footsteps, but not quite. More like something shifting inside the walls. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself it was just an old house settling, but then I noticed something impossible. One night, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to use the bathroom. As I stepped into the hallway,
I saw something that made my stomach drop. At the end of the hall, there was a staircase leading up to a second floor. That doesn't sound scary.
Right? Except my house didn't have a second floor. I stood there, frozen, staring at the stairs. I could see the faint outline of a door at the top, slightly ajar, but there was no light, just pure darkness beyond it. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I had lived in that house for months. I knew every inch of it, and I knew for a fact that this staircase had never been there before. I felt this deep, primal fear settle in my gut, like I had just stumbled across something I was never meant to see. I turned on every light in the house, but the staircase remained solid, real. I was too afraid to go near it, so I locked myself in my bedroom, barely sleeping until the sun came up. The next morning, I hesitantly stepped into the hallway, expecting to see the impossible stairs again, but they were gone, just a solid wall where they had been. I felt insane. I even ran my hands over the wall, knocking, pressing, looking for some hidden door or passage. Nothing. It was like they had never been there, but I knew what I saw. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. I started waking up at exactly 2:33 a.m. every night, always with the feeling that I wasn't alone. Sometimes I'd hear faint footsteps above me, like someone walking on a second floor that didn't exist. Other times, I'd wake up to my bedroom door slightly open, even though I always shut and locked it before bed. But the worst part was the whispers. I started hearing them in the middle of the night, soft, unintelligible, coming from above me, like something was trying to talk to me but couldn't quite form the words. I refused to sleep in that house anymore. I started spending nights at a friend's place, only going back during the day to grab clothes and essentials. I didn't care if I was being paranoid. I just knew something in that house wasn't right. And then, one night, I made the mistake of going back after dark. I had forgotten my laptop charger and figured I could be in and out in 5 minutes. As I stepped inside, the air felt wrong, heavy, suffocating. The whole house was silent. I grabbed my charger, ready to leave, when I heard it. A door creaking open, but not from my bedroom, from the hallway, from upstairs. My blood turned to ice. I slowly turned my head, and my heart nearly stopped. The staircase was back, standing there at the end of the hallway, just like before. But this time, something was different. The door at the top wasn't just ajar, it was wide open.
And something was standing in the doorway. I couldn't see it clearly, just a tall, shadowy figure. No eyes, no features, just darkness. But I could feel it watching me, studying me, waiting, and then it moved. It took a slow, deliberate step forward. That was all I needed. I bolted. I ran out of that house so fast I nearly tripped over myself. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I locked the doors, my hands shaking, and stared at the house. The hallway light was still on, but the staircase was gone. Just like that. Just an empty wall again. I never went back. I broke my lease, left everything behind, and never looked back. The landlord was pissed, but I didn't care. I had to get out. I tried looking up the history of the house, but there was nothing. No record of renovations, no history of paranormal activity, nothing. Just a normal house with something wrong inside it. To this day, I don't know what I saw. I don't know where that staircase led, or what was waiting at the top. But I do know one thing. It wanted me to come upstairs, and I thank whatever higher power exists that I never did. There are many theories surrounding this terrifying and impossible staircase phenomenon, and while none of them can fully explain what happened, they each offer chilling possibilities. Some believe this is a case of a place slip or interdimensional anomaly where certain locations can briefly intersect with other realities. In this theory, the staircase is not actually part of the house, but rather a structure from another timeline or parallel world bleeding into ours. This would explain why it only appears at certain times, like 2:33 a.m., as if that's the moment when the veil between realities is thinnest. If this is true, then the figure seen in the doorway might not be a ghost or a demon, but rather something or someone from an alternate plane of existence. It raises terrifying questions. Is there another version of the house, one where the staircase was always there? If so, was the shadowy figure another version of the homeowner, staring back in equal horror, seeing a wall where there should be a hallway? And if the staircase had been entered, would it have led to a different version of reality? One where the person entering might never return? Others believe this is an example of a non-Euclidean space, a phenomenon where architecture behaves in ways that should not be physically possible. Some theorists suggest that certain buildings, especially old or isolated ones, develop gaps in their physical structure that occasionally create impossible additions. This could mean that the staircase, in those brief moments of existence, was always a part of the house, just not in our perception of reality. There are legends about places where doors lead to rooms that shouldn't exist, hallways that stretch for miles before disappearing, or staircases that descend forever with no end. What if this was one of those places? What if the person climbed the stairs, they would have found themselves in a house that looked exactly the same, but wasn't? Another terrifying theory is that this is an example of a bait mimic house, or architectural haunting. This theory suggests that sometimes buildings themselves can become sentient, or at least aware of the people inside them. Instead of a traditional ghost, the house itself could be manipulating its own structure to lure, trap, or confuse its occupant. The whispers, the footsteps, the ever-present feeling of being watched. It all fits with the idea of a predatory house, a place that subtly alters itself over time to make its victim feel insane before finally taking them. Some even believe that people who vanish without explanation, missing persons, cases with no signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle, may have simply walked into a room, a staircase, or a doorway that shouldn't have been there and never came back. There's also the possibility that this was something much older than a simple haunting. Some cultures believe in threshold entities, beings that exist at the edges of perception, waiting at doorways, staircases, or even reflective surfaces like mirrors to catch a glimpse of the living. These entities do not communicate in ways we understand. They do not haunt in the traditional sense. They exist, watching, waiting. Many urban legends and folklore tales describe creatures that appear only when they are acknowledged. Maybe this shadow figure was something that only became aware of the homeowner once he saw the staircase. Maybe it had always been there, waiting in a space where it was normally unseen, and the act of noticing the stairs gave it access to him. If that's true, the worst thing the homeowner could have done was look too closely. A more psychological explanation suggests this could be an extreme case of dream bleed or a reality glitch. Some researchers believe that in certain heightened states, sleep deprivation, extreme fear, or stress, the brain can superimpose dream imagery onto reality.
In this theory, the staircase never physically existed, but the mind registered it as real, creating a perfect hallucination that blended seamlessly into the environment. This is often reported in cases of high strangeness, where people swear they see something physically real, only for it to vanish without a trace. The real question is, if the brain created the staircase, then what exactly was it trying to show? And why did it include a figure at the top? The last and most terrifying theory is that the house was never meant to be found. Some legends speak of places that are not built but born, homes that exist in the real world but do not belong to it. In these stories, people who stumble upon such places begin noticing small inconsistencies, rooms that seem bigger than they should be, windows that sometimes show landscapes that don't exist, doors that lock on.
Hey/X, I'm not sure how to even start this, but I need to get this off my chest. I just got back home after a really weird experience, and I can't stop feeling like something's off, like something's with me. I don't know if it's just paranoia, but I'm freaking out. It all started earlier today. I was walking home from work, taking my usual route through the park. It's a quiet place. Not many people go through there, especially after the sun sets. I'm not afraid of the dark or anything, but something felt wrong tonight. I was about halfway through when I heard something behind me. At first I thought it was just a squirrel or something, but then it came again. Footsteps. They were too heavy to be an animal, too regular. I kept walking, trying to ignore it, but I could feel my heart starting to race. The sound was getting closer. I didn't dare turn around, just kept walking faster. Then it stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. I thought maybe whoever was following me had just given up, but I didn't feel safe. I sped up my pace, trying not to make it obvious that I was getting freaked out. And then I heard it again, closer this time. Thud. 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 I didn't know what to do. My brain was screaming at me to look back, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I could feel them there, right behind me. My breath caught in my throat. I picked up my pace, my legs moving faster now, and I almost started running. I heard the footsteps matching my speed. They were following me. I finally couldn't take it anymore. I turned around, expecting to see something. Someone, but there was nothing there, just the dark path behind me. No one. The park was empty. I felt my pulse racing. Sweat started dripping down my neck. I turned back around, and I swear to God, I saw something in my peripheral vision, just for a second. A figure, tall, hunched, like it was trying to hide behind a tree. But when I looked directly at it, it was gone. I panicked, and without thinking, I started running. I wasn't even sure if I was running away from something or just running to get home as fast as possible. I didn't dare look back again. When I finally got home, I locked the door and checked every window. I felt stupid, but the unease wouldn't leave me. I kept thinking about that figure, how it was there 1 second, and then not there the next. Like it was waiting for me to look away before it moved. That was hours ago. I've been sitting here trying to calm down, but I keep hearing things. Scratching sounds. Whispers. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but it's not. I know it's not. There's something outside. Something that didn't leave when I got inside. And now, the worst part, I keep hearing the footsteps again. I know it's impossible. No one could have followed me home. But I hear them. Slowly, steadily, just outside my door. Thud, thud, thud. I'm too scared to open the door to check. Can someone tell me if I'm just losing it, or if this is something else? Dude, you're not crazy. I've had similar experiences. Not with footsteps, but with things that follow me home after dark. I'm telling you, some of those things aren't human. They know when you're vulnerable. Just keep the lights on and stay inside. They hate light. I don't know if this will help, but if you've noticed something following you more than once, it could be a shadow person. They feed on fear. Keep the door locked. Don't answer if you hear knocking. Whatever you do, don't let it inside. OP, I think I might know what you're dealing with. There's this old legend I heard about in a small town a while ago. People started noticing someone following them home. Not necessarily a person, but something off. The ones who ignored it would eventually just vanish. Like, completely. No one knew where they went, but they were never seen again. Do yourself a favor and don't ignore it. Whatever it is, it doesn't want to be seen. If it knows you're aware, it might come after you harder. OP, get a salt circle around your front door. If you haven't tried it already, it works. Some things can't cross salt, but be careful. It's not a guarantee, and it might just make things worse. But at this point, anything's worth a shot, right? I'm not going to scare you more, but you might want to check the mirrors. You might see it in them. I'm serious. A lot of people who get followed by something like this start seeing strange reflections in their mirrors. It doesn't happen right away, but it's something to keep in mind. OP, whatever you do, don't go back to the park. Don't even look at it again. If it's been following you, it's waiting for you to return. There's something about those places, the places no one else goes. That's where it waits. It's like a trap. I don't know how you'll get rid of it, but please, keep us updated. We're all kind of watching your back here. I can't believe I'm reading this. This is seriously creeping me out. OP, you need to get out of there. If you're hearing footsteps outside, I wouldn't risk it. Call someone, even if it's just a friend. At least you won't be alone. Also, keep your phone charged. You might need it. That was the last post from OP. After that, his account went quiet. No further updates came through, and no one ever heard from him again. It's possible that he either deleted his account or simply stopped posting, but considering the context of his last post, some of us have our own theories about what happened. One theory is that OP was indeed being followed by something, whether it was a shadow person, a paranormal entity, or even something far worse. Some users on /x/ suggested that entities like these feed on fear, and that the more you acknowledge them, the stronger they become. OP's paranoia and fear might have led to something more sinister, with the entity feeding off of his growing dread. Others believe that the trap described in the post could have been a warning that he was being stalked by something that would only show itself once he started acknowledging it. The fact that he heard the footsteps at his door, despite the physical evidence pointing to no one being outside, suggests that whatever was haunting him could cross into his space without a physical body. Another possibility is that OP may have stumbled upon an old urban legend or cursed location, like a park where strange occurrences are known to happen. Some users mentioned the idea of mirror reflections being linked to the phenomenon, hinting that the entity might have found a way into the physical world through mirrors or other reflective surfaces. There's also the idea that the park itself might have some sort of history, something dark tied to it.
Perhaps the figure he saw behind the tree wasn't just an ordinary figure. It could have been the spirit of someone lost there long ago, waiting for its next victim to cross its path. Then there's the even darker possibility. OP might have gone back to the park, or perhaps something followed him home in a way we don't fully understand. We'll never know what happened for sure, but the strange absence of any further posts, combined with his final words about hearing footsteps outside his door, leaves a lot to the imagination. Whatever it was that followed him, it's still out there, waiting for the next person to notice it.
I never thought much about the house at the end of our street. It was old, sure. One of those Victorian-style places that looked like it belonged in a black and white horror movie. But it wasn't abandoned. Someone lived there. We just never saw them. My name's Jake, and I live in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever really happens. The people here go to work, come home, mowed their lawns, and mind their own business. I guess that's why no one ever bothered questioning the house at the end of the street. If there was ever a time to start asking questions, though, it was the night my best friend Mason went missing. It started as a joke. A bunch of us were hanging out, swapping ghost stories, when someone brought up the house. I heard some guy lived there with his wife, and one night, she just disappeared, Sarah said, lowering her voice. Like, no explanation, just gone. Yeah, Mason chimed in, and some kid dared to knock on the door once, and the dude chased him down the street with a knife. We all laughed, but something about the way Mason looked at the house made me uneasy. It wasn't just amusement, it was curiosity. Alright, let's go check it out, he said. I should have said no. I should have told him to drop it, but I didn't want to look like a coward. So we went. Just Mason and me, sneaking out after midnight with flashlights and adrenaline pumping through our veins. As we got closer, the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. The house loomed over us, its peeling paint and boarded-up windows making it look almost skeletal. Mason reached the front porch first. The wood groaned under his weight. Dare me to knock, he whispered. I shook my head. Dude, let's just go. Too late. His knuckles rapped against the door, the sound echoing through the still night. We held our breath. Nothing. Mason grinned. See? Just an old... The door creaked open. We froze. The hallway inside was pitch black. The air smelled damp, like something rotting just beneath the surface. I took a step back, but Mason stepped forward. Mason, don't... I hissed, but he was already inside. I hesitated. My gut screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't let him go alone. So I followed. Inside, the air was thick, suffocating. The floorboards groaned beneath our feet. Dust motes swirled on the light of our flashlights. The place looked untouched, like no one had lived there for years. And then the door slammed shut, behind us. I spun around, heart hammering. Mason cursed under his breath, pulling at the knob. It wouldn't budge. What the hell? He muttered. Old house. Probably just... A thud echoed from upstairs. We both froze. Mason, I whispered. We need to go. Now. Another thud, then another. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Someone was up there. Mason raised his flashlight toward the staircase. Hello? He called. Silence. And then a whisper. Come upstairs. My blood turned to ice. The voice was low, raspy, and unmistakably inhuman. Mason grabbed my arm. Run. We bolted. Mason reached the door first, yanking at the knob, but it still wouldn't open. The footsteps above quickened. I spun around, shining my flashlight at the stairs. For a split second, I saw something. A shape, pale and twisted, crawling down the steps on all fours. Its mouth stretched too wide in a grotesque grin. I screamed. Mason grabbed a chair and slammed it against a window. Glass shattered, and without hesitation, he climbed through. I scrambled after him, feeling something cold brush against my ankle as I pulled myself outside. We hit the ground running. We didn't stop until we reached my house, slamming the door shut behind us. Our lungs burned. We didn't speak. Mason's hands were shaking. "Did you see?" "I don't know what I saw," I said quickly. I didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real. We agreed never to talk about it, but Mason wasn't the same after that night. He stopped hanging out as much, barely answered my text. Then, one day, he was just gone. His parents said he ran away, that he'd been acting strange for weeks. But I knew the truth. He went back to the house, and it took him. I tried to tell people. No one believed me. But last night, I woke up to a sound outside my window. When I looked, my heart nearly stopped. It was Mason. But his mouth was stretched too wide in a grotesque grin, and he was crawling. And then, without breaking eye contact, he lifted one shaking hand and pointed toward the house. My breath caught in my throat as his head tilted at an impossible angle, bones audibly cracking. His eyes, sunken and hollow, locked onto mine as his lips parted to reveal rows of jagged, needle-like teeth. He mouthed something, but I couldn't understand. My legs refused to move. A wave of cold washed over me, something unnatural, pulling at the edge of my consciousness. Mason's fingers twitched, and in an instant he lunged toward my window. I scrambled back, tripping over my desk chair as the glass rattled. He was gone, vanished into the darkness. But I could still hear it, that voice whispering from the shadows. "Come back." My room felt smaller, suffocating. I didn't sleep that night, and now, as I write this, I keep glancing at my window, half expecting to see him there, but something tells me that the next time I do, I won't get away, because the house wants me to. Alright, /X. I wasn't going to post this because I figured it was just my brain messing with me, but things have gotten worse, and I need to know if anyone else has experienced something like this. It started 3 nights ago. I was walking home from a friend's house pretty late, probably around 1 a.m. It wasn't a long walk, just a few blocks through my neighborhood, but there's this one section of the route where I have to cut through an empty lot. It's not exactly a shortcut, but it saves me from walking along the main road, which I hate doing at night. The lot is weird. It's just this patch of land where a house used to be before it burned down years ago. Now it's overgrown with weeds and these crooked trees that look like they belong in some haunted forest. I've walked through it plenty of times and never had an issue, but that night, something felt off. I stepped onto the lot, and instantly the air felt heavier. There was no wind, no sound at all, just complete silence. Even the usual distant hum of cars or night insects was gone. About halfway through, I got this overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone. You know that feeling when someone is right behind you, just out of sight? It was like that, but worse. Like something was watching me from every angle at once. I told myself I was being paranoid and kept walking, but then I heard it. A whisper. So quiet, I almost thought I imagined it. My heart started pounding, and I stopped in my tracks, scanning the trees. Nothing. I tried to brush it off, but then I heard it again, clearer this time. It wasn't words exactly, more like a breathy, broken murmur, coming from somewhere deeper in the lot. I don't know why, but I suddenly had the strongest feeling that I should not look directly at whatever was making that sound. It was pure instinct, like my body knew, before my brain did, that something was very, very wrong. My legs started moving on their own, and I walked faster, forcing myself to keep my eyes ahead. But as I neared the edge of the lot, I heard something new. Footsteps, not normal ones. These were heavy and slow, like something was deliberately taking its time, letting me hear each step as it got closer. The whispering didn't stop either. It was getting louder, more frantic, and I swear I could hear multiple voices now, overlapping as if they were arguing or pleading. I bolted. I don't even remember running. I just remember bursting out onto the street and sprinting all the way home without looking back. When I got inside, I locked the door and sat there for a while, trying to calm down. Eventually, I convinced myself it was my imagination, that I was just tired and freaked myself out. I even laughed at how stupid I must have looked, running like a lunatic over nothing. But the next night, I heard it again. This time, from outside my house. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard something just beyond my window. A whisper, just like before, low and breathy. My blood went cold. I live alone, in a second-story apartment. There's no balcony, no ledge. No one should be outside my window. I turned my phone's screen off, and my room went pitch black. I held my breath, listening. The whispering grew louder, but it still wasn't words. It was like mocking, like it was imitating speech but didn't actually know how to form real sentences. Then the tapping started. Light, rhythmic taps against the glass, as if whatever was out there knew I was listening and wanted me to acknowledge it. I lay completely still, too afraid to move. My brain kept screaming at me to look, but that same instinct from the lot kicked in. Don't look. I stayed like that for what felt like forever, and eventually the tapping stopped. The whispering faded, and when I finally worked up the nerve to glance at my window, there was nothing there. I barely slept that night. The next morning I checked outside, half expecting to see footprints in the dirt below my window, but there was nothing. Just smooth, undisturbed soil. I tried to go about my day as usual, convincing myself I was just hearing things again. But later that evening, I got a text from my friend, the one I had visited the night before all of this started. It was just one sentence. Did you hear it? My stomach dropped. I immediately called him, and the second he picked up, I could hear the fear in his voice. He told me he'd been hearing it too. The whispers, the footsteps, even the tapping at his windows. He lived on the other side of town.
There was no way this was just some prank. We started comparing details, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. That's when he told me something that made my blood run cold. I think it followed you. He said the first night he heard it was right after I left his house. He
hadn't even stepped outside. He was just sitting in his living room when he heard whispering from the hallway. He thought it was me at first, but when he checked, no one was there. Then, the next night, he heard footsteps outside his bedroom door. He lives alone. We both started spiraling, throwing out theories. Maybe we walked through some cursed ground. Maybe we saw something we weren't supposed to. But then he asked me something that made me break out in a cold sweat. Have you looked in a mirror? I hadn't. I had been actively avoiding them. Something in my gut told me I didn't want to see my reflection. But now, after hearing him say that, I had to know. I hesitated before going to my bathroom. The second I stepped inside, I felt it. That thick, suffocating silence. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Slowly, I lifted my eyes to the mirror. My reflection was wrong. At first glance, it looked normal, but as I stared, little details started to stick out. My expression wasn't quite right. too stiff, too vacant, and then, slowly, it smiled. I didn't. My actual face remained frozen in horror, but the thing in the mirror grinned at me, wide and unnatural, stretching far past what should have been possible. And then it whispered, not from the mirror, not from behind me, but from inside my own head. You saw me. I don't remember what happened next. I think I blacked out, because the next thing I knew, I was sitting on my bathroom floor, the mirror shattered in front of me, blood dripping from my hands. I don't even remember breaking it. My friend won't answer my calls anymore. I went to his house today, but no one answered the door. His car was in the driveway, and the lights were on, but he wouldn't respond. I don't think he's gone. I think he's still in there. I think whatever this thing is, it got to him. And I think I might be next. It's night now, and I'm sitting here typing this because I don't know what else to do. The whispering started again, only this time, it's inside my apartment. The footsteps aren't outside anymore. They're in the hall. I can hear the floor creaking as it moves, slow and deliberate. I don't think it cares if I see it anymore. It wants me to. It's right outside my door now. I don't know what happens if I look, but I don't think I'll be able to stop myself this time. If you hear whispering in a place where there should be none, if you feel eyes on you when you're alone, don't look. No matter how strong the urge is, no matter how much it calls to you, don't look, because once you do, it knows you, and it never lets go.
I never believed in ghosts. I never thought there was anything beyond the physical world, no strange forces or supernatural entities. But after what happened to me, I don't know what to believe anymore. I've been trying to explain it, make sense of it, but no matter how much I try, I can't. The only thing I know for sure is that something was in my house, and it wasn't something I could see. It all started 2 months ago when I moved into my first apartment. I had been living with my parents for the last couple of years, trying to save up, and when I finally had enough money for a place of my own, I jumped at the opportunity. The apartment was small but charming, located in an old building just on the edge of town. The rent was reasonable, and the area was quiet, perfect for someone who worked late hours and preferred a little peace and solitude. The apartment itself wasn't fancy, but it was cozy. There were creaky floors, a musty smell that lingered in the air, and a thin layer of dust that I had to scrub away from the countertops, but it felt like home right away. Everything was fine for the first week. I was adjusting to living on my own, figuring out the best places to put my furniture, learning the ins and outs of my new space. I even started enjoying the solitude. My neighbors were distant, mostly quiet, and I rarely saw anyone, which suited me just fine. But then, on the night of the second week, I heard it. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep after a long shift at work. The city outside was silent, and the only sounds I could hear were the soft hum of my fridge and the distant sounds of traffic. It was peaceful. too peaceful. I had just started drifting off when I heard a faint whisper. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct, and it seemed to come from somewhere in the room. I sat up quickly, heart pounding in my chest, but the apartment was dark and still, and I couldn't see anything unusual. I told myself it was just the wind or my imagination, and I tried to go back to sleep. But then it happened again. This time I was sure I heard it. It was a soft voice, almost like a murmur coming from inside the walls. I froze. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't anyone I knew, and it wasn't coming from the street outside or the apartment next door. The voice seemed to be whispering directly to me, but I couldn't make out the words. My skin prickled, and I felt a wave of cold air wash over me despite the warmth of the room. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, turning on the flashlight and shining it around the room. There was nothing there. I checked the closet, the bathroom, even under the bed, but everything was as it should be. Just when I thought I had imagined the whole thing, I heard it again. A whisper, low and urgent, coming from the wall behind my head. My blood ran cold. I pressed my ear against the wall, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. It was still faint, but this time I could almost make out the word, help. And then a series of unintelligible mutters. I jerked back, my heart racing. I had never been one to believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, but in that moment, I was convinced that something was wrong with this apartment. I didn't know what it was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something living in the wall. I turned on the lights, sat up for a while, and tried to calm myself down, but the whispers didn't stop. They continued throughout the night, faint but persistent, coming from different parts of the wall. I tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize it. Old building, creaking pipes, maybe it's just the sound of the house settling. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The next day, I called the landlord. She was an older woman, someone I had met briefly when I moved in. She was polite but a bit aloof, and I didn't know her very well. I explained what was happening, hoping she would have some logical explanation for the noises. She seemed unfazed. She said the building was old and that sometimes things could get a little creepy, but she assured me that there was nothing to worry about. Old buildings have their quirks, she said with a shrug. You'll get used to it. But I didn't get used to it. The whispers grew louder over the next few days, and they became more frequent. It wasn't just at night anymore. I started hearing them during the day too, while I was sitting on the couch making dinner, or even when I was in the shower. The voice was always faint, always just out of reach, but I could swear it was trying to communicate with me. The worst part was that the voice knew things about me. At first it was subtle, just the occasional mention of something I had done that day, or something I had thought about. It was like the voice was reading my mind, or at least pretending to. But then, one night, it crossed a line. I was sitting in the living room, trying to ignore the whispers when I heard it clearly. "You're not alone, you know," the voice whispered. I felt a chill run down my spine. I froze, staring at the wall, my pulse pounding in my ears. Who are you?" I asked aloud, almost whispering to myself. There was a pause, and then the voice came again, this time much clearer and much closer. "I'm right behind you." I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty, just the shadows and the light from my desk lamp. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it wasn't happening. But every time I turned off the lights at night, the whispers returned. I started sleeping with the lights on, but even then, I could hear it, The voice, always lurking in the walls. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching me, listening to me, waiting. Then came the night that changed everything. I had just finished my shift at work and was exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open. I walked into my apartment, shut the door behind me, and collapsed onto the couch. For the first time in weeks, I was too tired to care about the whispers. I turned off the lights and let the darkness take over, hoping to finally get a full night's sleep. But the moment my eyes, I heard it. A loud bang, followed by a scraping sound. I shot upright, heart in my throat. The noise was coming from the wall, right next to the couch. I grabbed my phone, using its flashlight to scan the room, but there was nothing there. I could hear the scraping again, followed by more bangs, louder this time as if something was trying to break through the wall. I stood up, trembling, and backed away slowly. The room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier. The whispers started again, but this time it wasn't a voice. It was a growl, low and guttural, like something was trying to speak through a mouthful of gravel. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The sound was so intense that it felt like the walls were closing in on me. I ran out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me. I stood outside in the hallway, heart pounding in my chest, trying to collect myself. I didn't know what was happening, but I couldn't stay there another minute. I ran down the stairs and out into the street, not caring where I went, just needing to get away from that apartment, from the whispers, from whatever was in the walls. I stayed at a friend's place that night, and when I returned the next day, I found that the apartment had been completely silent. The whispers had stopped, the scratching had stopped. Everything was normal, but too normal. I didn't know if I had imagined the whole thing, if I had just been overtired or stressed, but I knew that I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed up my things and moved out within the weekend. I never told anyone what happened, because honestly, I'm not sure I believe it myself. But I know one thing for sure. Whatever was in those walls, it was waiting for me. And now that I'm gone, I don't know if it's still there. But I do know this. There's no way I'm ever going back.
I never owned a full-length mirror. I live alone in a tiny apartment, just a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen. The only mirror I had was the one above my bathroom sink. So when I woke up one morning and saw a tall antique mirror standing against my bedroom wall, I felt my stomach drop. I didn't buy this. I stared at it, my mind racing. Had I forgotten? Had someone broken in and left it? That didn't make any sense. My front door was still locked, the window shut. And yet there it was. The frame was old, carved with intricate patterns, almost organic, like twisting vines or bones. The glass was warped and I should have thrown it out right then, but I didn't. Instead, I did something stupid. I walked up to it, and I looked. At first, everything seemed normal. My reflection stared back, same messy hair, same tired eyes. But something was off. The longer I looked, the more it felt like my reflection was watching me back, not just mirroring me, observing me. I lifted my hand. My reflection did the same. Perfectly normal. My reflection took a second too long to follow. I stepped back, heart pounding. The air in my room felt wrong, like the pressure had changed. I turned away, refusing to look at it anymore. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like something was standing over my bed, staring down at me. But every time I turned on the light, the room was empty, except for the mirror lurking in the corner. The next morning, I decided enough was enough. I grabbed the mirror and dragged it out into the hallway. I was going to throw it away, take it to the dumpster. But when I came back from work that night, it was back in my bedroom. I froze in the doorway. My brain refused to make sense of it. Had I forgotten? No. I knew I'd put it outside. I remembered the weight of it, the way my fingers had pressed into the wood frame. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone saw it in the hall and assumed it belonged to me. Maybe my land. Put it back inside. I forced myself to ignore it. But that night something changed. At around 3 a.m. I woke up. Not to a noise, not to movement, just a feeling. My room was too quiet. The air felt still, thick with something unspoken. And then I heard it, a soft, faint tapping, coming from the mirror. My chest tightened. I didn't move. Then, again, a quiet, deliberate tap, tap, tap like fingers against glass. Slowly, I turned my head toward the mirror. My reflection was awake, but I hadn't moved. I was still lying down hammering, barely breathing. But my reflection was sitting up in bed, staring at me. Then it smiled. A slow, stretching grin filled with too many teeth. I bolted. I grabbed the blanket, wrapped it around the mirror, and hauled it out of my apartment, not caring how much noise I made. I didn't stop until I reached the dumpster behind my building, where I shoved it inside and slammed the lid shut. I stood there, panting. The night was still, too still. And then, just as I turned to go back inside, I heard a voice, muffled, distant, coming from the dumpster. Don't leave me. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my apartment, door deadbolted, lights all on. The next morning, I checked the dumpster. The mirror was gone. I don't know who took it. I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it again. A soft, distant tap, tap, tap. And I don't look at mirrors anymore.
I don't talk to my neighbors much. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where people nod politely but don't really interact. But there's one house, the one across the street. I've never seen anyone go in or out. The yard is overgrown, the mailbox is rusted shut. It looks abandoned, except for one thing. The basement light is always on. At first I didn't think much of I. Maybe someone lived there, just kept to themselves. But then I started noticing things. The light would flicker, always at the same time every night, 1:33 a.m. Sometimes it would stay on for hours. Other nights it would blink rapidly, like Morse code. And then, last week, something changed. The light went out. I don't know why, but it bothered me. It had been on for so long, its absence felt wrong, like something had finally ended. The next night it came back on, but this time something was different. There was a shadow, a figure moving behind the glass. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the more I watched, the clearer it became. Someone, or something, was pacing back and forth. Then, at exactly 1:33 a.m., it stopped and turned toward me. I nearly dropped my coffee. I was standing by my bedroom window, lights off, just watching it. There was no way whoever was down there could see me, but I swear, it was looking right at me. The next morning, I felt a shaky feeling that something was off. So I did something stupid. I went to the house. The front door was locked. But when I walked around to the back, I saw that the basement door was slightly open. I should have turned around. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I reached out and pushed the door open. The basement was cold. The kind of cold that sticks to your bones. The air smelled damp, like mildew and something rotting. And then I saw them. Rows of chairs. Old wooden chairs lined up facing the same direction, toward the back wall, like an audience. And in the center of the floor, a single light bulb dangling from the ceiling. It was still swinging slightly, like someone had just brushed past it. Then behind me, a footstep. I turned so fast I nearly fell. My breath caught in my throat. The basement was empty, but the door was closing. lunged for it, grabbing the handle just as it slammed shut. My pulse was hammering in my ears as I shoved my way out, tripping over the steps, sprinting home. I locked my doors, pulled my curtains shut. I didn't sleep that night, and at 1:33 a.m., the basement light went off again, but this time it didn't come back on. I don't know what I interrupted. I don't know who or what was watching me from that basement. But the next morning, the house was empty. The chairs were gone. The light bulb was missing. And the basement door wide open, like it was waiting for me to come back. I worked the night shift at a 24-hour gas station just outside of town. It's a lonely job, mostly just truckers passing through, the occasional teenager trying to buy beer with a fake ID. Nothing too crazy, but there's this one guy. I don't know his name. I just call him the man who never blinks. He started showing up about 3 months ago. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., he walks in, buys a pack of gum, and leaves. Doesn't say a word, doesn't even blink. At first, I thought he was just weird. Plenty of weird people out here. But then I started noticing things. He always wears the same clothes, a plain gray hoodie, jeans, scuffed white sneakers. They never change, they never look dirty. He doesn't drive. There's no car, no bike, no footprints in the dirt lot outside. He just appears. And the security cameras, they glitch out every time he walks in. I asked my coworker Dave if he'd noticed anything weird about him. He just shrugged. Dude's probably harmless, he said. Just some insomniac. But I wasn't so sure. Last week, I decided to test something. I locked the doors at 2:10 a.m. just for a few minutes. Watched through the window. At exactly 2:13 a.m., he was there. Standing perfectly still just outside the glass. His head tilted slightly, like he was waiting. I didn't move. He didn't either. We just stood there, staring at each other. His face was expressionless. His pupils were huge, swallowing almost all of his irises. The seconds dragged. Then, he raised his hand. Not a wave, not a knock, just a slow, deliberate motion. His palm pressing flat against the glass. I swear, for a second it felt like the entire building shook. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. I checked the cameras. Nothing, just static. I haven't locked the doors since, because I have this sinking feeling that if I ever try to keep him out again, he won't just stand outside. He'll find another way in.
Stepping back before dark, that was the rule. But time moves differently in the woods, and when the sun dipped below the horizon, we realized we were lost. It was me, Josh, and Riley. We'd grown up together, spent every summer exploring the forest behind Josh's house. We knew those woods, or at least, we thought we did. The plan was simple. Hike to the old fire tower, take some pictures, and head back before sunset. We made it to the tower just fine, spent maybe half an hour up there messing around, watching the sun lower in the sky. Then Riley said he heard something, a clicking sound. Probably just a deer, Josh said, but Riley frowned. No, it's weird. Listen. We went silent. Sure enough, there it was, a rhythmic click, 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 steady, deliberate. Not like an animal moving through the brush, more like something imitating an animal. We laughed it off at first, but then we started walking back. That's when we found the footprints, bare, human, leading in circles. My stomach knotted. Josh forced a chuckle. Alright, now it's creepy. Riley was staring at the prints, brow furrowed. Who the hell is walking out here barefoot? The woods were too thick for it to be clear. The nearest road was miles away, and besides, the tracks. They weren't normal. The spacing was off, like whoever or whatever had made them didn't walk quite like a person. Go, I said. The clippings moved closer. We picked up our boots. At first it was fine. We were still joking, still having convinced we were scaring ourselves for nothing. But then the path started to feel long, like we were walking in circles. Josh muttered, "We passed this tree before." I didn't want to believe it, but yeah, we had. A thick oak with deep scars along the bark. I'd run my fingers over it maybe 15 minutes earlier. We're going to go told me. Riley whispered. The air felt heavy, thick with the smell of damp wood and something else. Something rotting. That's when we saw the clearing. A massive tree stood in the center, gnarled and ancient. Its bark carved with strange symbols, the kind that looked like they meant something, even if you didn't know what. At its base, a hole, a dark, gaping maw into the earth. Josh swallowed hard. We need to leave. But Riley, he wasn't moving. He was staring at the hole, his breathing shallow. Then he whispered, "Someone's down there." My skin crawled. What? He pointed. I saw something move. I didn't want to look, but I did. The hole was just a void, swallowing light. But as I stared, my vision adjusted. Hand, pale, reaching. Then before I could even scream, I grabbed Riley's ankle. We let out a strangled yell, stumbling backward, but the thing pulled him down. Josh now lunged, grabbing him the legs, pulling as hard as we could. His eyes were wide but clear, his hands clutching at the dirt. Then we heard a voice, soft, warm, "Come down, it's safe." But it wasn't Riley's voice. It sounded like him, but the cadence was off. The words were too slow, too terrifying, like something was learning how to speak. We pulled harder. Then, suddenly, Riley was free. We fell backward, gasping. The hole was silent. No hand, no movement. Just an empty void. Riley was shaken. His knees were ripped at the ankle, his skin covered in long, thin scratches, like fingernails had been digging into him. We didn't say a word. We just ran. I don't remember getting back. 1 minute we were spinning through the trees, and the next we were stumbling into Josh's backyard, landing, covered in sweat and dirt. None of us spoke about it. Really never told us we saw him. But after that night, he changed. He was quieter, always looking up where they were. His hands would shake as he walked past the woods. Then, a month later, he disappeared. Search parties come to the forest for weeks. No body, no clues, just gone. Josh and I know the truth. He never left. Sometimes when I dream, I see that hole again. And in the darkness, I heard his voice, soft, careful. Come down, it's safe.
started small, just tiny noises, little scratching sounds in the walls that I barely noticed at first. I live alone. Well, mostly alone. My cat Binks is my only companion. At first, I figured it was mice. The house I rent is old, the kind where you can hear every creak, every groan of the wood settling, the kind where you swear the air shifts differently at night. It wasn't until the third night that I realized something was wrong. I woke up around 2 a.m., not sure why. Maybe a dream, maybe instinct. Binks was curled up on my chest, which was odd. He usually sleeps at the foot of the bed. His ears were flattened, his tail puffed up. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Not mine, not Binks's. It was slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere in my room. I froze. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would give me away. Slowly, I reached for my phone on the nightstand and turned on the screen, letting the faint glow cast across the room. Nothing. But the breathing stopped. I stayed awake until dawn, every muscle tensed, eyes darting to the corners of my room. When the morning light finally bled through my curtains, I convinced myself it had been my imagination. Sleep deprivation does weird things, but then things got worse. The scratching in the walls wasn't just at night anymore. It followed me from room to room, always staying just behind me. I'd be washing dishes and I'd hear it beneath the sink. Watching TV, it was behind the wall. Then the whispering started. At first I thought it was the wind, soft, unintelligible. But one night I pressed my ear against the wall and held my breath. I heard my name, clear as day. I shot away from the wall, my skin crawling. That night I decided I needed to check. I couldn't live like this, feeling like my house was constantly holding its breath, waiting. I grabbed a flashlight, moved my dresser away from the vent cover, and unscrewed it. The air that rushed out was stale. Shining my light inside, I expected to see nothing but dust. But then I saw something move, a shadow shifting, deeper in the crawl space. My throat tightened. My mind screamed at me to run, but I stayed frozen, staring into the darkness. And then, eyes. Two pale, unblinking eyes staring back at me from the vent. I dropped the flashlight. My breath caught in my throat as the thing, whatever it was, began to move. Slow, deliberate shifting. I ran. I didn't even grab my keys. I just bolted out of the house barefoot, feeling the cold pavement against my feet. I made it to my car, locked the doors, and sat there panting, staring at my bedroom window. Something moved behind the curtains. I never went back inside. I called my landlord the next morning. He sounded weirdly unfazed, just muttered something about old houses and things that shouldn't be disturbed. They put the house back up for rent last week. I wonder if the new tenants have noticed the noises in the walls yet.